My dear sisters and brothers, I really, really am honored to be here with you today. And I want to thank you for setting aside this time. I am sure there's no one on this Zoom call that looked at their calendar these days and had nothing there. And you were so grateful that an associate gathering was called for these days. So I say that because, you know, where we put our time and our bodies speaks sometimes more powerfully than our words in terms of what matters to us. So I just am really very grateful that you choose, you know, to be here. So I'd like to kind of walk through some reflections, really. It's a little hard cast to say this like a presentation, you know. It's really a reflection, and I appreciate the opportunity to be invited to be in this conversation and reflection, because every time I think about this, I think about it differently, certainly, and I hope more deeply because of the experience of living and reflecting together and gathering more insights, you know, from all those with whom I am in conversation. So I'm hoping this is a mutual opportunity this afternoon to have a conversation about living the transforming love of God. So just let me say at the outset, in case you want to take a nap, these are the three takeaways, you know, that I'd like to reflect on. First of all, to understand charism as being universal, that there's something very large about charism, not just yours or, well, it's not yours, but not just the RSCJ, but the SSJ and the Franciscans and so forth. There's something universal about it, and we are not in charge of it. It is given freely by the Spirit to be lived as long as the world needs it. Ted can check me on this, this statistic, but it is somewhere around 82% of the charisms that were given over the history of the Catholic Church, 2,000 plus years, no longer exist. They're not embodied anywhere. So that's a very important point, that the charisms as a universal reality, and they are given to individuals through the church for the life of the world. The second takeaway is that our vocation life, beginning with our gospel vocation, and then the other vocation paths that we take after our baptism, vocation as unifier. And the vocations are not intended to be competitive. And they're also, much like charisms, they're not intended to be in their parallel lanes. You know, they're meant to be shared and so forth. So vocation is really a unifier. And then thirdly, the commitments that we each make. A commitment is a way for us to be unified. And probably the most important insight that for me that I would like to offer you this afternoon is the question at the end of this slide. What is the cost of the kind of transformation and the depth and scope of it to which we're being invited these days? All of us. The we, I mean, in terms of the planet, all the species, the human species especially, and so forth, all the way down, if you will, to the vocation of associate, the vocation of marriage, and the vocation of religious life, and so forth. So charism as universal, vocation as unifier, and commitment as unifying. And what is the cost of the kind of transformation that this moment invites us to? So just a few things about charism. As I've reflected on this, I've come to consider that charism is really a prism for diversity. You know, much like a literal prism that you hold up to the light, and that's what the charisms are. They're prisms for the incredible gift of diversity. And when we hold it up to the light, there's a spark, which creates a threshold, if you will, for us, for individuals, those given the spark of Francis or the spark of Dominic or the spark of PBVM or whatever all the initials are. The charism, though, sheds the light on the gospel. It's not an entity in and of itself. It is to serve as shedding light on the gospel. And so in that regard, all of us in various charism families are all being invited to the same, whatever's on the other side of the threshold. For me as a Joseph, or you as an RSCJ, or all the other charisms, when we cross that charism threshold, we're in the gospel. The charism, of course, prompts then a response. And as I said a few minutes ago, the charism is freely given by the Spirit. We have no idea who's walking around with the various charisms out there. No idea at all. Another important kind of a prelude, if you will, that we, vowed members of religious institutes and associates, do not have the charism. You probably don't do this, but I've heard so many vowed members especially say, oh, our co-ministers, they're so wonderful. They have our charism. And I've heard some associates, not you, but other associate groups say, oh, we have to make sure that we pass on our charism. You do not have the charism. The charism has you. Charism has me. The charism has us. And it has a lot of others also. So I actually want to pause at this moment, and I want to, with the wonderful help of Bridget and the technology people, I'd like us to actually watch a piece of music. Usually we listen to music. I mean, you can listen to it also, but it's the group Sweet Honey in the Rock. You probably know of them. They have this incredible piece that they do called Wade in the Water.
Yes.
And what's interesting to me about this is they did this as a sound check. It was not like at a performance. They were checking their microphones. And the people who were working with them in the concert hall were so taken by it that they said, you just have to make this available. I invite you to look at and watch and listen to each of them as they get lost in this music. And I'm offering it to us as a musical version of the charism in action. If you could imagine each of these women representing different people who have, in your case, the RSCJ charism. Maybe somebody's a vowed religious, somebody's an administrator in a ministry, maybe somebody's a donor, somebody's an associate, But I invite you to watch the music and to experience it as this is how the charism of the RSCJs is intended to be alive. Okay?
Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water, my God's gonna trouble the water. Come on and wade in the water. You gotta wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. My God's gonna trouble the water. Well, now you see those children all dressed up in white. dressed up in blue. You know my God's gonna trouble the water. I see it looks like my people, they're coming on through. Well, my God's gonna trouble the water.
Well, everybody knows just wait,
wait in the water, wait in the water, children, wait in the water, children, wait in the water, my God's gonna trouble the water.
See those children dressed in red, my God, He's gonna trouble the water. You know it must be the children that Moses led, my God, He's gonna trouble the water.
See those children all dressed in green. God's gonna trouble the water. You know they're moving down to that Jordan stream.
Well, God's gonna trouble the water. Come on, children, down in the water, my children. Wait in the water, my children. Wait in the water, children. Wait in the water. Wait in the water, my God's gonna trouble the water.
You know, some say Peter and some say Paul.
My God,
my God, my God. Well, you know there ain't but one God made us all.
my God's
Gonna trouble the water. Everybody gonna just wait on
in the water,
wait in the water.
wait in the water, children. Wait in the water, children. Wait in the water, my children. Wait in the water. You know my God's gonna trouble the water. Wait, my God's gonna trouble the water. I know my God's gonna trouble the water. My God's gonna trouble. Well, my God's gonna trouble the water.
God is gonna trouble the water.
I loved Carol's talk yesterday. And this was the result of my reflection on the talk. If we perceive the white light as the light of Christ, the light of God, the light of the Spirit, and Christ's heart is actually this wonderful piece of glass. By standing in the heart of Christ, the result is this extraordinary display of color. And this captures the uniqueness of our vocation as we respond to being rooted in the heart of Christ. Now I want to turn our attention to charism. I really, again, thought yesterday's talk was amazing. I particularly, when I think about charism and what I thought about sharing with you today, was so impressed by the questions you all raised in small groups as well as in the large group. So this first part is an attempt to answer some of those questions that came up. So what do we mean by charism? Well, the first definition of charism, and I think this is important, it is a theological term for the extraordinary graces given to an individual for the good of others. Now, most of us associate this gift, this charism, with a founder of a religious congregation. But before we go down that road, let me just say to us, each of us, if we live our lives as Sophie has encouraged us to, if we live our lives open to the Spirit, each of us receives extraordinary graces, and they are for the good of others. And it's important for us to be conscious of this. By the very nature of being human and by being open to the Spirit, all of us have this potential to be gifted by the charism by charism. And I think it's more than just potential. I really think we have the responsibility to remain as open and as attentive, as in tune with the Spirit as we possibly can be, for the sake of this extraordinary gift of life we've been given, but for the sake of God's people and for the sake of God's creation. Typically, religious congregations like the Society refer to charism as the animating spirit behind the mission. In that sense, most people connect the word charism with the founder and see it as the inspirational purpose that starts communities and keeps them going. It gives communities distinctive personalities and imbues their daily practice with meaning. And really, this is what Carol was saying yesterday. A community's unique charism inspires its own spirituality, defines its mission, and forms its culture. So the source of our family charism, and I really liked that term yesterday, family charism. So the source of our spirit, our family charism, is Sophie. Now, the spirit of the Society. So just as a founder's charism becomes embodied in a congregation, that the group then, in our case, the Society of the Sacred Heart, manifests a distinctive spirit. It is this spirit or ethos that informs the culture of the ministry sponsored by the particular congregation. Often within the context of the community, of the congregation, of us as associates and RSCJs, this spirit is called charism as well. They're actually not the same thing, but I don't want to split hairs here. I just wanted to be sure that everybody saw the connection between charism, Sophie's gift, and spirit, our living, our embodying the spirit of Sophie and living the mission of the Society of the Sacred Heart. So this spirit becomes active through spirit, inspired as we are by Sophie. We, associates in RSCJ, believe the mission of the Society is to discover and to reveal God's love in the heart of the world. Now, here's where I think associates, you have a choice to make, and RSCJs have made a public choice in terms of avowed life. I believe associates have been making this choice too, but I didn't want to boldly state that since this is about you defining your vocation as associates. But I believe that both you and we live, in order to live oriented to the objective, the mission, that all of us commit ourselves to a life that is wholly contemplative and wholly apostolic. The way of life is characterized by a dual orientation, both inward and outward, towards both silence and action. The dynamic within this dual orientation creates the energy that fuels mission. And so one of the things I'm inviting you to consider as associates of the Sacred Heart is choosing, and some of you I know have made this choice, but I don't know all of you. And I know some of you are just starting your journey as associates. But what I'm saying is choosing, and this is for my sisters too, choosing to live a life characterized by this dual orientation, both inward and outward, is a daily discernment and choice. As we were reminded yesterday, by our charism, we are consecrated to glorifying the heart of Jesus. We answer his call to discover and reveal his love, letting ourselves be transformed by his Spirit so as to live united and conformed to him. And through our love and service, to radiate the very love of his heart. What happens? So what's distinctive What's the distinctive spirit of the Society of the Sacred Heart? And how does this influence us as associates in RSCJs? Well, spirit evolves, our spirit evolves from charism. This animating spirit of our vocation as associates in RSCJ is Sophie's charism. The sensitivity to the Holy Spirit and belief in grace are foundational, not just conviction, but practices. It's not simply enough to believe something. One must act from the conviction. One must see grace, and I hope we all see grace, as the free and undiscerned gift that God gives us in the hope that we'll respond. As associates in RSCJs, we recognize that grace is the life-giving power of the Spirit that inspires our hearts and transforms our lives. Not simply for our sake, but for the sake of others. Associates in RSCJs are called to activate Sophie's charism by being open to receiving it and constantly enriching and updating it with our own contributions and practices. Let me make a connection with something Carol said yesterday, and I know some of you were disturbed by this. Over 2,000 charisms no longer active within the church as the people of God. What does that mean? You know, a gift, a charism, is given to an individual by the Holy Spirit for the sake of the people. If the people no longer know the gift, are no longer engaged by the gift, then the gift ceases to be experienced. Why are associates so important? Why are RSCJs so important? Because we are attempting to not only live from Sophie's charism, from that gift that the Spirit gave to her, but we are attempting to enrich it, to update it by our very lives and how we're living. We are called as associates in RSCJs to orient our lives towards a mutual process of contemplation and action. In silence, we listen to our heart, where the Spirit dwells. And as we pay close attention to the movement within, we are impelled to act in ways that communicate God's love for the human family and for creation. So let me invite you again to another moment, another pause. What have you heard that encourages you? What spoke to your heart?